On behalf of the University of California, thank you for tuning in today for the November 2020 edition of the UC Alumni Career Network. My name is Katie Russo, and I'm a proud first-generation professional. I currently serve as the Director of Alumni Career Engagement at UCLA. I am honored to be moderating today's event focused on first-generation professional development. Our discussion today will focus on first-generation professional development. 40% of UC students and alumni are first in their families to attend college. First-generation professionals are pioneers in their career path, and today we are excited to connect you with fellow UC first-gen professionals as they share their stories, tips, and advice for navigating the professional workplace. This program is part of a UC-wide effort to unite and support alumni across our 10 campuses. We aim to equip you with the information, insights, and connections necessary to launch, grow, or expand your career. Throughout today's session, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions of our speakers by clicking the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen or by emailing alumni@ucop.edu. We will try to answer as many questions as possible during our time today. I am pleased to be joined by three inspiring UC alumni. Bernice Maldonado empowers first-gen professionals from various backgrounds with the tools and support they need to succeed in corporate America. She is the CEO and founder of BerniceMaldonado.com, a Los Angeles-based strategy consulting and research practice that provides solutions to maximize the potential and success of diverse, underrepresented talent. Bernice holds a bachelor's degree in business administration from UC Riverside and a master's degree in organizational development and leadership from UC Irvine's Paul Mirage School of Business. Verduzco is a first-generation college graduate born in Los Angeles, California, and raised all throughout Southern California. He currently works at a social and food startup called Crave as their Director of Marketing and Growth. Ish previously worked at Snap as their diversity partnerships leads, and prior to that, worked at LinkedIn for 5 years in roles ranging from recruiting events, employer brand, and social media marketing. Ish is a 2014 alumnus of UC Merced. Lastly, Janella Leano is a 2020 Doctor of Physical Therapy graduate of UC San Francisco. Bernice, Ish, and Janella, thank you so much for being part of today's panel. Without further ado, let's dive into our first question. My first question is, can you tell us a little bit about your post-UC journey and how you landed your current job? And Bernice, could we please start with you?
Sure, of course. So I'll just be super honest, my journey post, at least undergraduate from UC Riverside was very windy. A lot of different twists and turns, and a lot of it was because I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do with my business degree. So I think one of my first jobs out of college was working at an independent research board. So that's where they review studies, that are using, for example, human participants in different pharmaceutical studies and things like that. So I was an operations manager doing that. So I said, well, this is pretty fun to manage people, so I want to do that more. Then I went to a small nonprofit and started managing a group of about 30 people. And then after that, I went into information technology and started doing project management. And then after that, I went into human resources and started working there. So it was quite, and there's a number of other kind of roles in different industries and different companies I went through, because again, I was on this journey to really find out what I wanted to do. So after all that time, I ended up doing organizational change management, which is what I've done most recently. And then I realized, you know what, I should really be working with first-gen professionals. So that's when I decided to start my business a couple of years ago. So it's been a fantastic journey. I've learned so much out of it, but I definitely encourage people, if you're not quite sure where you want to go or what you want to do, just keep trying a lot of different things, because I have definitely tried a lot of different things and all along the way learned so much. So definitely a super windy road, but I really enjoyed how I came back to, my original place. So that was kind of a quick overview of my post-UC kind of experience.
Wonderful, thank you. And Ish, can you share with us your post-UC journey and how you landed your current role?
Of course. And much like Bernice, mine was super windy. Um, when I started going to UC Merced, I actually was a mechanical engineering major, switched it up like halfway through, became a management major, graduated, didn't really know what exactly I wanted to do. So I had to move back home with my family after, I don't know, like 6 months of trying to land a job. No job, no luck, and eventually landed a part-time job at a gym, 24-hour fitness, doing like assistant management work. I love working out, so I thought it would be like a really great fit, but it turns out I love being in the gym to work out, not necessarily being in the gym to work. Um, Throughout all of college, I was always been fascinated with the world of social media and these huge tech companies, but I never saw myself working at one of them because in my mind, I didn't know anybody that worked at these tech companies. And on top of that, I thought it was only like engineers, like coders behind a computer, like coding. And here I come from like a management background, marketing background. But while I was working at 24 Hour Fitness, I found out that one of my friends from college, who was like a fraternity brother from a business fraternity that I was in, was working at LinkedIn. And LinkedIn was at the time was like my company that I wanted to work, like my dream company. And so I pretty much begged him to put me on the phone with his manager, which is a bold move for a 22-year-old fresh college grad. But it turned out to be a good move. I got into LinkedIn as a contractor. I worked for 10 months there and then became full-time. And then eventually started working at Snap. And then from Snap, I got my current job at Crave. And the way that I got this job is during my time at Snap, I started doing like an advisory role for Crave just on the side, a couple of hours a month, helping them out with their marketing strategy. And that turned out to be a smart move because a role opened up on the team. I was already working with them pretty well on the side, had a good relationship. And so they brought me on board full time.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And then Janella, can you share your post-UC journey and how you ended up as physical therapist?
Yeah, actually, so I graduated from UC San Diego with a human bio major because I knew I wanted to be in the healthcare field, but I still didn't know what I wanted to become. I was on the doctor route, maybe on the nursing route, and I didn't find out I wanted to become a physical therapist until I graduated. And so I took 2 years to get the experience and to finish the prerequisites. And so I ended up going to UCSF for graduate school for physical therapy. And after I graduated, which was this year, June, which is pretty recent, I also had a windy route to get to where I am right now. And so, there isn't this long amount of time that you're going to be, or this certain amount of time that you're going to be figuring out what you're going to do. It's going to be maybe 3 months. It might be, 5 years. It doesn't really matter, because for me, right after I graduated, I found a job. I worked there for about a month and a half. And then I found another job that I liked better. And I worked there for 3 months. And now I'm on my third job, right out of school already. And so, it's a lot of learning about who you are and what you really want. And I'm a person that doesn't even like school, to be honest. And I only, I knew I wanted to be a physical therapist, and the only route is to go to school. And so knowing what my end goal was really helped me kind of move along through my life and through my career. And so just knowing what your goals are, knowing who you are, and knowing what your strengths and weaknesses are that's really going to help you just finding that job for you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think a theme from even all of your journeys is, being open to what's out there, learning about yourself, learning what you like, what your interests and passions are, and trying different things. I think so many of you said, you might have had an idea or goal, but being able to try different things, talk to different people, learn about what's out there, those are the ways that doors can start to open for you. So my next question for you all is, from your perspective, what does it mean to be a first generation professional? And Ish, can we start with you on this one?
Yeah, of course. It sounds cliche, but for me, it means like being a trailblazer, especially working in the tech industry where, I don't know if you all know, but it's not the most diverse industry. Across the board, it's like somewhere around 5 or 6% Latino, and the numbers for Black professionals within that percentage is like 3 or 4%. And so you can imagine if you're a first gen Latino, that even like narrows the pool even more. So it just means like for me being a trailblazer, doing stuff like this, trying to help out as much as possible and like educate other people, because I wish I would have had somebody, you know, like show me the way, or at least let me know that these are opportunities that are for me as well, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And Janella, what about you? What does it mean to be a first generation professional to you?
I think for me, I've learned about humility in general, and learning to admit my own mistakes and trying to learn from them. As first gen, I think it was a struggle not knowing as much as other people would or knew, you know, not knowing the resources that were out there, not knowing the certain career pathways you could take. And I think being a first gen professional, you really learn to, I guess, empathize with, at least for me, for my patients or for your coworkers or for anybody that you meet. I think you really learn humility and empathy because you've already experienced the struggles, and you don't really realize that, but you've experienced those struggles. And I think you just have that innate accommodation to these people. You know, you just, I don't know, you just learn a lot more than you've actually learned, if that makes any sense.
It does. Yeah, it does.
Okay.
We're
but
with
yeah,
you.
it really helps in learning about yourself and about others.
Yeah, definitely. Bernice, what about you?
So for me, a first generation professional is, in my experience, it's someone who's comes from either a working class or maybe a lower income background, and now they're going into a professional environment because they've gone on to college or, you know, gotten a higher education. So now they're working in these professional or corporate environments. And I know for me, it was a huge culture shock to go into one of my first jobs right out of high school was working at an investment company. And I was doing customer service for people who had high net worth income. And so just seeing some of these bank accounts, I was like, I can't even believe people have this money, because, you know, growing up, it was always, you know, I was always reminded that we didn't have money and we couldn't buy stuff and we couldn't do this. And here I'm helping out, you know, people with these huge bank accounts. So that was like a huge culture shock. But just overall, the environment for me was a culture shock because, you know, being told, or growing up, I was always told, you know, keep your head down, don't talk about yourself, you know, don't ask questions, you know, just do your work and you're going to do fine. But I learned right away when I got into that environment that it's not about that. It's about, you know, promoting yourself. It's about letting people know who you are and what value you bring. So it was really, I always felt like I was kind of balancing these two worlds where, you know, at home, I had to, you know, just kind of follow what was, you know, what we were told and just keep my head down and not talk about myself. Otherwise, it might be seen as bragging. But yet when I'd have to go to work, people were constantly asking me about me and me having to talk about myself and essentially market who I am during interviews or just anything else. So I know for a lot of first gen professionals, we're kind of balancing, you know, multiple either bicultural or just, you know, worlds that, which I think is a huge skill. I mean, if any first gen, that's a huge talent to have because it's, I mean, it just already shows, you know, your skill to be able to manage different worlds and different cultures. So that's how I define first gen professional.
Yeah, that's really great. Yeah, I think for me too, as I've thought about it, I think there's a lot of pressure, I think, on first generation students and alumni to have the answers, have things figured out. But I've found over time that it's actually more valuable to be able to ask for help and connect with people, talk to others. And I think also for me, just personally, I've just learned to own like being a work in progress and that that's okay. I don't need to have it all figured out and I'm not going to pretend to have it all figured out. So I think that's been a part of it too, is just knowing that, you know, people are there to help you, people are there to support you, and find those allies, mentors that you can add to your kind of, you know, support system and network to help lift you up. So my next question for all of you is, what specific steps have you taken to build or grow your professional network? So can we start with Janella on this one?
Yeah, Katie, you actually had a great segue into my answer.
I didn't even plan that. Yeah.
Well, for me specifically, I ended up going to graduate school, and graduate school is very new for me, obviously. And so the first thing that I did that helped me in college was trying to join as many organizations as possible, and all the clubs and all of that stuff. And one of the first ones that I joined was Firstgen Support Services at UCSF, and that's led by Elise Alderson. She's the Vice Chancellor of Student Life over there, and she is a huge advocate for the Firstgen community, and she helps host all these events where staff and faculty that are Firstgen can come socialize with the students that are also Firstgen. And then being part of that organization, I was also working in the background trying to match first generation students with first generation professors or staff and faculty, and trying to find that mentor-mentee relationship, and trying to make sure that the first gen students have that resource to reach out to, and they can contact them and ask them any of their career questions or their financial questions or anything like that. Just going for a random coffee meetup and just having a conversation, and that is a great way to network. And I think one thing that's different with this organization and these events is that when you go to these events, the faculty and staff that are there are willing to help you. Whereas when you're just going to approach someone random, you're not really sure if they're willing to be a mentor for anybody. So when you go to that event, you know that these people are open to being your mentor, are open to helping you out. And that was a huge help for me to build my current social network. And so that helped me get to where I am right now.
That's wonderful. Yeah, we need more groups like that. I think we've seen a lot more in the last few years, a lot of institutions that are creating that community for first gen, not only students, but staff, faculty, alumni, to be able to come together and support one another. So that's really great to hear. Bernice, what about you? What specific steps have you taken to build or grow your professional network?
Sure. So, this is a huge topic that comes up a lot, especially amongst first gen, because of course we don't come from environments where you have a ready built network, right? I know for myself, I did not have professionals growing up that I knew or that I had access to. So of course, some of us are starting from scratch when it comes to networking. Some of the things though I like to emphasize is before you start building your network, to plan and prepare for it. So what I mean by that is think about what your goal is with networking. So what exactly are you trying to get out of networking? Is it to get a new job? Is it to learn about a new industry? What are you trying to get out of it? Another tip would be is to get very clear on what your skills and talents are. Just write them down, write a list of all of your skills, your talents, your strengths, areas of improvement. And a third quick tip I would give also is to be able to practice talking and answering, tell me about yourself, right? Because when you start talking to people, that's one of the first questions someone will ask you, tell me about yourself. And it's such a broad question. Sometimes you get caught off guard, right? Because you're so focused on meeting this person and getting to know them that sometimes they'll ask you that and you almost feel like you're not prepared. And I know for a lot of first gen professionals and students, some of us have a hard time talking about ourselves, right? Because again, culturally, some of us may have been told not to talk about ourselves. So I would really stress people to get comfortable, answering that question, tell me about yourself. How would you answer it? And practice talking to it, like you're answering it to different people. So say you meet the president of a company, maybe it's a peer, maybe it's a professor, whatever, just practice talking about what you want them to know about you. So 3 quick tips I wanted to give about that. But the way I built my network is plain curiosity. I am just so curious about people's lives and kind of like their the path that they took. So for me, I've been able to grow my network to a pretty large network because I came at it not as I need to meet this person to get a job, but it was more, I just want to learn about them. And I want, and if they're interested, they'll ask about me too. And that's when more genuine conversations come up. But I always had a plan too. I always had a plan. So if I met someone, I had a plan as to what questions I wanted to ask them or what I wanted to know, because of course you don't want to waste a person's time either. So yeah, definitely some quick tips, and just be meaningful about why you want to build your network and what the goal of it is.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice. I think the preparation is so key, like you said, to have a goal with how, what's the purpose of your networking, what's your intention? And then your other point there about the tell me about yourself question, I completely echo everything you said, because I think that is something that you learn over time, is how are you sharing who you are and your story or your journey, or what impact or what experiences have impacted you the most along the way that you want to make sure those people know. I think over time, and like you said, there is that cultural aspect of, you don't want to sound like you're bragging about yourself and things like that. So it's finding how you're communicating about yourself to people that, once again, hopefully they would take interest in learning about you as well. So yeah, fantastic advice. And then Ish, what about you? How have you built or grown your professional network?
Yeah, so much like what Bernice was saying, a lot of us first gen professionals, we kind of start from scratch. That's literally how I started when I moved to San Francisco with two luggages on a train, and just like stayed on my friend's couch for a couple of months. I had nobody in San Francisco or within like 300 or 400 miles, like not a family member, a handful of friends, but I didn't know a single person in the company or just like have anybody that I could call. So I made it a point to actively go out and meet people on a regular basis. So there's tons of networking events that you can find on Eventbrite. And so I would just go every single month. I said I would at least do one. I would try to do 2 per month. And like there's different types of events you can learn about tech. You could just meet people. If you're Latino, there's events for Latinos, all that stuff. And that on top of like being very curious, just like Bernice said, in my job. So while working at LinkedIn, when I started working there, it was about 6,000 employees. And I told myself, like, wouldn't it be cool if I like met all 6,000 people over the next couple of years? And so every single Friday, I would try to meet up with somebody new, like whether it was at the happy hour or having lunch with somebody new every single day, or as much as I could. And then little by little, you start accumulating these relationships, and genuinely, not just like trying to use somebody for a job or use somebody for promotion. And next thing you know, this network of people becomes your friends, So being curious, again, attending these networking events, they might be cliche, they might be kind of like feel weird and awkward, but if you come at it with the right angle, I think they could be helpful. And there's a ton of organizations too. So if you find yourself from a marginalized group like Latino, Black in tech, or whatever it is, there's organizations like Techqueria, TECHQUERIA, and that is an organization specifically for Latinos in tech. Again, there's only 5 or 6% of us in the whole industry. We gotta like meet each other and like feel like we have some sort of backing and support. Another organization is called Afrotech. It's a huge the biggest conference for Black professionals in the tech industry. Another one is Out in Tech. It's for LGBTQI community. So those are the things that I would give in terms of tips. And then I guess another one that if you don't want to necessarily attend events is building an online presence and using these tools like social media to connect with people online. And everybody like uses LinkedIn. I think that's great. But another tool to build more genuine relationships, I think, is Twitter. So just going to Twitter and typing in like keywords of people that you want to like learn from or get to know. And even if they don't follow you back, you at least start to like get these bite-sized pieces of information of their brain and how they work and how they think. And then sharing content so that other people know who you are. And you kind of build this networking relationship online over time. So those are my tips.
Yeah, those are all fantastic. And for those of you, joining us today, Ish shared a lot of different organizations and resources in his answer there. And if you didn't jot some of them down, don't worry. We will be sending out a follow-up email with this recording, and it will have links to a lot of those different organizations or other resources that he shared there. So in a few minutes, we will begin addressing questions from today's audience. So please remember to submit your questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, or by emailing alumni@ucop.edu. So as we're wrapping up the first portion of our webinar and time today, I have just a few more questions. I have a question for each of you more individually. So we'll start with Bernice for this first one. So many of our attendees today have shared that they've experienced imposter syndrome, the idea that you've only succeeded due to luck and not because of your talent or qualifications as they've transitioned into the workplace. Have you dealt with this, and can you offer any advice to our audience on how you've overcome this or managed it?
Sure. So I don't think I'm still over it. I still feel I have imposter syndrome. To this day, it sometimes creeps up on me. But yes, so I have dealt with it throughout my career. And so what I ended up, initially, I tried to handle it or deal with it on my own, which I would recommend not to do that looking back. I know early on in my career, I kept thinking, well, maybe it is me. Maybe I'm not good enough to be here. You know, and again, I was usually a lot of times, because I was working in investment companies and large banks and working closely with senior management and executive teams, I was often either the only woman or the only woman and minority in that room. So a lot of times I knew all eyes were on me, and I would constantly question whether I was even good enough to be in that room. Regardless, even as much as positive feedback I got, how many compliments I got on my work, I still couldn't get rid of that feeling. And so what I ended up doing, which I would recommend doing this much earlier, I did it way too late in my career. I started joining affinity groups, kind of like Ish was saying earlier, joining groups of, where people that either have, similar backgrounds as you or similar experiences, where you can now feel like you're not the only one that's feeling like this. So if there's employee resource groups you can join, or even external professional groups that you can join, I highly encourage that. And not only that, even just taking on leadership roles within those groups too, because that's an awesome opportunity, of course, to showcase yourself and your talents. I would also recommend getting a mentor or a coach, to kind of, again, someone who can relate and can, you can share these experiences, or they have shared experiences as well. And they can give you advice as to how they overcame some of these challenges. The other thing that I would really emphasize is, again, documenting all of your successes and accomplishments, because it's just a great mental reminder of everything you do. Sometimes we get so caught up with, just doing work and doing, is that we don't take the time to actually document and really just take a look at everything that we're doing. And the one thing I forgot to mention too at the beginning is, I really want to emphasize with first generation professionals that you are already a success. Your ability to have gone to get higher education and now going into, these professional environments, I mean, that's a huge achievement. That's a huge accomplishment. So I really want you to understand that you are already a success. Now it's just time for you to build on that success and to have other people, see it too. And don't be shy about talking about it as well. But again, I know imposter syndrome is a huge topic. I know it's something that's really difficult to really, I don't think I'll ever get over it, because I'll constantly be in that state. But I really want to emphasize recognize that you're already a success, and build on that. And just write it down and recognize everything that you're bringing, everything you're learning, everything you're accomplishing. So for me, that has helped me as well. And also, of course, last but not least, being around people who are supportive and celebrate you. So try to keep as many people close to you that celebrate you, and you can celebrate them, so that it's a constant reminder and you're keeping yourself in that environment of positivity.
Wow, yeah, that's all great advice. I love your tip to write down or kind of jot down our successes and achievements, because I think that's so true along the way. It's really easy to, we're all our own worst critic. And I think it's really easy to focus on our missteps or shortcomings. I didn't do this right. If I would have done this better, we seem to hold on to those things. And I think that's a really great idea, is not only acknowledging that you are already a success and you've already achieved so much, but being able to jot down those wins to remind yourself how far you've come. I think I love that idea. It's great advice. So my next question is for Ish. A number of first-gen UC alumni have expressed a strong interest in pursuing careers in technology, but often don't know where to start. Could you offer a few tips based on your experiences at LinkedIn, Snapchat, and Crave?
Yeah, I'm going to provide a little bit of a framework as well as kind of like how I built my career in tech. So the framework is essentially 4 parts. Know or learn what you're uniquely good at. If something comes natural to you, or you just tend to like be more of a social person, or you're good at computers, whatever that is, know what that is, or ask people who know you very well, because sometimes we ourselves don't know, you know? So that's the first part. The second part is know what you really love doing. So sometimes those two don't line up. So if you really love doing something, you're uniquely good at it, that checks off 2. The third one is know what provides value to a specific company or business. And sometimes we don't really know this. So doing a quick LinkedIn search and just saying like, if you want to be a salesperson or recruiting or whatever that is, searching it on LinkedIn to see if other jobs actually come up with those keywords. So that's the third part. And then the fourth part is knowing where you fit or where that position would fit in an organization, so that you can start to think through, well, if I got this dream role at this company, well, my manager could be this. In 2 years, my role could be this, just to get a better understanding of like what the career pathway would look like. So that's kind of a framework of like understanding what type of roles you could fit in tech, because it's really confusing. I wish somebody would make like a mind map of like all the different roles in tech and like what backgrounds people can. I mean, I might do that. That's kind of a good idea. I'll let you know if I do that. But yeah, just like
keep us posted.
mapping out like all the different types of roles and like the personality traits or backgrounds or majors that could fit into tech. Because again, I was 21 years old and I didn't think that I could work in the tech industry because I didn't have exposure to it. And all I thought it was people coding behind a computer in like a hoodie in the dark, you know? That's kind of like the framework. And I'll give you a little bit of a story of how I created a new job at LinkedIn, which is kind of unheard of. So I was working as a global events coordinator, doing recruiting events. So helping the company hire amazing talent, amazing professionals. And I had this itch to like do social media marketing and brand work, but it's really tough to like switch when you're in a company, you know, to like do a lateral move or, you know, just create a new role. So I just asked my manager at the time, I said, hey, I'm good at social media marketing. I can show you my portfolio of stuff that I've done. I can show you my website, my personal following. We need this at the company because we're not using social media, and we're a social media company. We're not using this tool to attract university students. Like there's a gap in the market basically. And so I pitched to her, I said, hey, what if I do 80% of my job doing events and then 20% of my job doing like this social media, or I'll even do it for free. I'll do it on top of my job, you know? And so I did that for 6 months, and slowly, little by little, my role became more and more in that marketing and social media role. Well, eventually, after doing that for about a year, I essentially wrote out what that role would be if I did it full time. I did it in a Google Doc. It was like 2 pages. Here's what I would do on a daily basis. Here's what would be my my objectives, things that I would like trend towards. Here's how it would affect the business and such. And I handed that over to her and I said, look, the company obviously needs this. I'm already doing the work. Like, what do you say of just like letting me make this role? And I created the role, and I did that role for about 1.5 years. And then that helped me get my social media marketing lead role at LinkedIn too. So I guess the insight or the feedback to people that are like listening in is, even if a role doesn't exist, doesn't mean that you can't create it. I have so many friends who have done this too. Like people have created diversity program manager roles when they were recruiters, and like that role didn't exist before. Diversity strategist roles. But again, it goes back to like, what are you uniquely good at? What do you like doing? How do you provide value? And how do you position it, or how do you position yourself within the company? And then lastly, I think using the LinkedIn alumni tool is really helpful. So if you like search on LinkedIn, your school, you can find people within a specific company that went to your school, and even like it tells you when they graduated and all that stuff too. So you can message them and ask them just questions, you know, like, hey, how did you get in your job? I'm really interested. Because then little by little, you'll start narrowing the types of roles that you could be good at or could actually like, versus being in a role and then you're like, whoa, this is not what I expected. and then you got to do it for a little while.
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of like the feedback that I have, or the tips.
Yeah, that's a wealth of great just insights and advice, and love the idea for the kind of mind map of the different roles in tech. And once again, like different backgrounds you can have and things like that, or your experiences. And speaking to Ish's point about the LinkedIn alumni tool, that's another resource we'll share out in the follow-up email. Actually at UCLA last week, we just did a webinar on LinkedIn kind of tips, and we highlighted the alumni tool as well as our UCLA One networking platform. So we'll share that out so that those of you who have not explored the alumni tool for finding alumni at your UC institution that work in whatever industry, whether it's tech or nonprofit, whatever, we'll make sure you know how to access the alumni tool on LinkedIn and find those other alumni to connect with. So that's a great tip there. So our last question before we kind of break out into taking more questions from Q&A, my last question is for Janella. What advice can you offer fellow UC Firstgen alumni who are considering graduate school? Are there things that you wish you would have known before starting your graduate school education?
Yeah, so I think the number one advice that I would give is to not worry as much. I think whether you're young, you just graduated from college, or you're further out in your career, don't be afraid to tackle on graduate school if that is the end goal that you want. So if you want to go to medical school, if you want to become a scientist or a researcher, you have to go to graduate school, do it, because that's what you want to end up. That's what your end goal is. I think one thing coming from the Asian community, we're really pushed to becoming a doctor or a lawyer or something that makes a lot of money. And so for me, I struggled a lot with, do I want to become a doctor and, make my family proud, or do I want to do something that I want to do? And, you got to really think about, do you really care more about your financial stability or your mental stability? And I chose mental stability. And so I chose to be a physical therapist because that's who I wanted to become. And so for those of us first gen students who, really have those helicopter parents that are, making sure that you take the path that they want, just really take the steps to think about what you want. And some people are very hesitant about going to medical school because it's a lot of money, especially going to UCSF, where you have to live in San Francisco, which has the highest, rental prices ever. It's a little scary. But there are a lot of financial resources that UCSF offers, and there's a lot of first gen support services, like I was saying, that they offer. And so if you are considering graduate school, look that school up and look for those resources. Make sure they have those advertised, because if they don't have any information on those resources, that's a bad sign. And so, make sure they have those resources for you, and make sure you do what's best for you. No matter where you are in life or in your career. If you have a family and you feel like you're ready to, go back to school, do it. And if you do go back to school and you do have that family, make sure that family is supportive of you. I think the best advice that I got going into grad school was that my problems overshadow all of your problems. And so if I'm struggling in school or with a class and, I had a bad grade on a test and, they had, a bad day at work, they have to remember that you're still in school and you're the one that's struggling. So as long as your family understands that, that's actually a huge, huge help. And they understand where you're coming from. And they definitely, won't take that for granted. And especially when you have imposter syndrome going into graduate school, you're like, I don't know if I'll be able to pass all of my classes. But with graduate school, it's a lot different from undergrad. Where undergrad, you're very competitive. You got to get that A, you got to pass. Whereas graduate school, you're all going towards the similar goal, and you're not really competing with each other. You're just helping each other. And so if you don't even have a family or don't have any support getting into graduate school, you have your classmates, because you're all struggling together. You're all going through to virtual class together, and you really bond really well, because I've been with my class for 3 years and we're all really, really close. And so even if you don't have that supportive family, you have the people at school to help you. And then you have your mentors that you can be proactive about finding to help you out through your graduate school career.
Yeah, that's great advice, Janella. So valuable. And I would just echo everything Janella said. And as another first gen professional who also has gone on to graduate school, the advice I would also give for those considering graduate school or any type of grad program is do your research and, make sure that it is, make sure that that graduate program is exactly what you want and or need for maybe long-term career goals. If I could go back in time, I probably would have done some more research and talked to more people before going to graduate school to make sure, and this was really what I wanted to do, it is such an investment financially and of your time and energy. And it is a lot of work. Like Janella said, it's very different from undergrad. So make sure that you've really decided that that is what you need to achieve X job or, a certain type of career. Talk to people and talk to those that have been in the program. That's one of the best things you can do is if you're exploring different programs out there, you want to find one that is, best suits kind of your personality and your style and your needs. So talk to other students or alumni of those graduate programs and let them share with you about their experience. I think that will give you great insight as to, especially when you're deciding between different programs, but make sure you do your research and talk to people to figure out, before you invest all that time and money, that this is the right thing for me and the right step in my career. All right, so now we are going to we have a lot of questions coming in from our audience. So we're going to start answering some of those Q&A questions. So the first question we have is from Harriet, and it's for all our panelists. So any of you are welcome to answer. What is one of the greatest challenges you faced as a first generation professional, and how did you address or overcome this? And any of you are, if there's something that sticks out, you're welcome.
I can go ahead and go.
Okay,
it's something we all talked about already, but it's like the feeling of being alone. Especially if you're younger in your career and you get pushed into this industry where it's already super intimidating and people might not come from the same backgrounds or have different priorities or come from wealth or come from, like generations of people who have gone to school and you're the first one. So just intimidation and that imposter syndrome that we all talked about. But the way that I still face it on a regular basis, but the way that I've been able to kind of like, I guess, cope with it is learning that other people who I look up to experience it too, even if they do come from money or come from wealth or whatever that is, or they've been in their, been at their organization for like 30 years. Just like knowing that you're not alone, I put out a post on LinkedIn recently, and I asked specifically for this, like, do you all experience imposter syndrome? And if so, like, can you share about it? Because there are other people who would love to learn. And there were CEOs, there were VPs, there were directors who have been in their, like at their company or been in their careers for like 20 years that have said, yes, I face this on a regular basis. And like that sense of assurance, knowing that like, wow, this person has been doing this for a long time and even they go through it, it makes you feel better at the end of the day. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Bernice, did you have
I'll
something?
just add one, and I totally agree with Ish as well. I think for me, the biggest challenge was navigating my professional development in my career. Because again, I initially and early on in my career, I didn't have mentors or sponsors or anything. And so I was trying to do it by myself. And also I didn't want to ask for help because I didn't want people to think that I wasn't able to do it by myself. So that was one mistake that I would advise not to do. Is definitely there's tons of people out there who are willing to help. So definitely ask for help. But I think that the challenging part in that was just navigating careers, because a lot of times, we have to face it. A lot of times you get career growth through your network, right? Through people people who promote you, people who will be like your PR agent. And that's what I learned later on in my career is finally when I understood what it really takes to move up in organizations, I was like, it completely changed my life and my career path. So just, again, we talked about networking, but that's such a important component. And I really want to emphasize people to really understand and get good at networking, because, you know, it's, you know, we hear it all the time. Someone gets in a, you know, a position and you're like, geez, how did they get it? I've been working my butt off for like a year and I can't get a promotion, right? But people have to know about you and about your skills and about your potential, because when a job opens up or a position opens up, you should be one of the first people that comes to their mind. And, you know, you could really leverage that, you know, people knowing about you too for your career growth. So yeah, just think about networking, but there's a whole lot of other stuff that go along with it. But it's definitely the whole navigating the whole professional and career development part that was challenging for me. But again, once I understood it, it like changed my life. It really did. I finally started putting all the pieces together and I'm like, okay, I'm going to try this. But once I learned it, it completely changed my life. So that was my kind of most challenging time.
Yeah. And that's great. That's great insight too, because we all know that most jobs nowadays, like 80 to 90% of those jobs are filled through referral or word of mouth and networking. So it's just so important. I just can't stress Bernice's point enough. So my next question comes from Lupe and is for Ish. You've developed a strong personal brand beyond your current role. How does this dynamic of having freedom to focus on your own projects work with your employer and maybe obligations there?
That's a good question. I mean, I've always been one to do a lot of things outside of work. So I wouldn't say that that's necessarily who they hired, but I mean, I'm an open book. So when I interview, I always have talked about the other things that I do outside of my work. And specifically while I was working at Snap, I started writing a book, and I did have to go through the legal team just to ensure that, you know, I wasn't giving any confidential information. The book was completely like not related to tech at all. It's like a self-development book. And but I guess for certain projects, you do have to go through legal. But if you're just building your personal brand and working on your side hustles, or like for me, I was DJing for like 10 years, and that didn't interfere with my job at all. It actually made me like not necessarily better at my job, but it helped me a lot because I started DJing a lot of like the happy hours at work. And, you know, I met so many people. Like I met hundreds, maybe thousands of people just from DJing. Yeah, to answer the question, if you work somewhere, it's always good to check in with the legal team just to ensure that you're on the right side, because you don't want them to end up taking your stuff. You know, at the end of the day, these companies are very powerful and they have huge legal teams.
Yeah, definitely. So our next question is for Bernice. When it came down to making your career moves, why did you feel it was the right time and what were your reasons?
Yeah, so it's a great question. A lot of different reasons. Some of it sometimes was because I felt I wasn't a fit in that culture. And sometimes you can sense it. So that's one thing I would advise people. If you feel in your gut that you may not fit in, or it's just not the culture that you want to work for, I would definitely follow that and make other plans, you know, to maybe, you know, go somewhere else or maybe a different department within the company. But that was one of the reasons initially where I was hopping around a lot, because maybe the culture, I know some of the ways that people were being managed, what I didn't really agree with, or the way, you know, people were being promoted. So, you know, my values didn't align with that company. So I hopped around a lot until I could find something that I felt, you know, people were being treated equally and fairly. The other thing was too, I would discover that I was good at something and I wanted to try it. So for example, when I was working in human resources, I was a HR manager, and they had me managing a lot of different projects, like human resource information technology projects. They were implementing recruiting systems and doing things like that. And I was project managing those things. Before I even knew I was project managing, I just thought I was managing a bunch of work. So I said, you know, and then I came across a project management certificate at UC Irvine, and I said, I'm going to check this out and see if it could help me in my current job. then I learned, of course, then I joined the Project Management Institute. I started doing all this project management stuff. And I said, I want to actually do project management. So I went into the IT world and started doing project management. And I said, well, maybe not IT, maybe I want to do this project management for business. So I started doing strategic projects, which also involve project management. So that's kind of how it was like, for me, it was more of a skill and interest thing. So if something was super interesting to me and I felt like I was really good at it, I would decide, you know, is it a good time to change now, or should I learn a little bit more? Or should I get a certificate or some kind of training around it? So yeah, it was more really just my gut instinct. If I felt like this was something I was really interested in and willing to change jobs to do it, then I would change.
Yeah, that's great advice. Yeah, that's another, I think, huge tip as well, is listen in those moments, especially as you're kind of going along through different jobs and careers, listen to your gut and tune in when something doesn't feel right, or you're picking up on themes or patterns from your organization, whether it's culture, just how, you know, different systems and processes go, just kind of observe all that and take it in and trust your gut when something feels like, you know what, I want to try something different, or, oh, this opportunity is going to come up. So trust your gut and listen to it and tune into kind of all those different things. I think that you can continue to gather information, and that will help you figure out where you fit best. So my next question is for all of you. So anyone is welcome to answer and jump in on this one. How have you navigated the changing relationships with people at home as your career advances and life becomes very different from theirs? And Michelle, who asked this question, had shared sometimes she feels like she doesn't fit in anywhere anymore. Janella, would you like to start on this one?
Yeah, that's a very difficult question.
Yeah.
For me, going through school, it was a huge struggle. I was pushed mentally, physically for my job, and emotionally. And I think the best way to do that, at least to prepare, is, like I said earlier, to prepare your family about what you're going to go through and let them know that, you know, you will be struggling. It is going to be a hard path, but you're doing it for you. And when they know that you're doing it for yourself, they'll be more supportive. In terms of, maybe after the fact that, maybe you already graduated or it's already been changed, I think, you have to start networking again. You got to find those resources again and, kind of do a little reboot and find those other people that are there struggling as well and kind of bond through that. Or, and don't be afraid to let your family know. At least for me, if I told my parents, hey, you're not as supportive as usual, or, things are changing, what's going on. I think that's a huge thing with Asian community, also trying to address your personal emotional issues with your family. We don't really talk about that. And I think that's something you kind of learn growing up, that's actually a normal thing to do. And it's, it's getting more, becoming the norm now to talk about your mental issues or your emotional, issues and, those changes that are happening, and just being more open with your family and not being afraid to let them know what's going on, because it's being more accepted now. We're being more aware of the current depression that is happening during this year, the rise in depression and anxiety rates. And so just making sure that you have that open communication and you're not afraid to share that. I feel like that's just the best advice that I could give right now.
Yeah, that's great advice. Anyone else on that question want to share?
Yeah, sure. For me, it's definitely something that I think about. For example, in my family, when we get together at times with extended family members, we still, in my family, we have a whole gamut of, like I have cousins who clean offices and homes for a living. They're housekeepers. And then, I have a brother who has a PhD. And so I think it's what we do when we do get together is we don't, we do not kind of focus on the differences, but rather like what's common amongst all of us. So we'll talk about family, about memories, about whatever it is. So just being, considerate of, your environment and situation. I'm not going to talk to my cousin and, about graduate school unless she asks me if she's genuinely interested. I'll share with her, but I'm not going to go into a family situation and start talking about, all this school stuff and consulting stuff I'm doing. But also when they do ask, I'm totally open to talking about it. The other thing too, my mom, she actually never had a chance to go to school in her life, like has never gotten any sort of education. She was orphaned at a really young age in Mexico. And so she also doesn't speak English. And so with her, she'll ask me sometimes like, what do you do in your job? And when I explain it to her, it's really interesting because, I'll say, well, I create communications for executives. And she'll say, things like, so you tell them what to say? And I'm like, yes, I tell them what to say to their employees. But why do they need that? And you do that? You tell them what to say and they say it? And it's like, it's just interesting the way, like when you start explaining to someone who's not, knowledgeable about it. But I think for me, it's been a really humbling experience too, that, just being in such a diverse family, I think it's just really taught me to be appreciative of the opportunities that I've gotten. But also going back to the question is, I feel like I've also naturally met and became friends with a lot of other people who are also first gen, right? Because you tend to gravitate towards people who have similar experiences. Like my husband is also a first gen. And so I think naturally in my network, I have a lot of first gen friends. So I think that's also how I've been able to also kind of, navigate this too.
That's great. Thank you. So I have one final question for Janella that has come in from Q&A. How did you incorporate your first gen experience into your grad school applications? Did you explain it as an obstacle to overcome or as a strength from the beginning?
Just like the question where they ask, what are your strengths and weaknesses? I think that is something you could use for that question. Probably not that specifically, but for your essays to get into grad school, it's a great way to educate the faculty what first gen really is, because believe it or not many people know what first gen is and what the current struggles are. And so I think that you could take that opportunity to define first gen for you, what first gen means to you, and then use that as a weakness first, because I found it as a weakness. I'm not an eloquent speaker. I use words that I make up words and I think they're real. One time I said game breaker instead of game changer. So little things like that, that was a weakness for me, but I use that as a strength because, it shows that I'm unique and I'm very personable as well. And I feel like my way of relating to others is my strength. And I think I attribute a lot of that to being first gen, because most of my experiences that I've learned are from other people and from learning what they have done. That's how I've learned. And so, I've kind of obtained all these traits from different people, and it's, so when you're writing that essay, you just gotta say it like it is. It's very unique to each person, each one of us. And I think just attending this panel itself, watching this is a huge first step and is a huge strength, and it shows a lot about your character because you're being proactive in wanting to improve yourself, being a first generation student or professional. And so, you could add that you're proactive, you're willing to learn, willing to grow. And I think that's a trait that a first gen professional could have. So.
Right. Yeah, wonderful. And there's so many great questions in the Q&A that came in that we won't be able to get to. And we apologize where we can't get to all your questions, but we will find another way to address the questions that many of you submitted. Final, as we wrap up today, I know we have about a minute or two left. I'd like to just quickly ask each of you in 30 seconds or less if you could share one last piece of advice or feedback with our listeners today. So Bernice, what's one thing you really want our audience to walk away with today?
Yeah, to be proud of your background and don't be shy about talking about all the talents and experience that your background has provided you.
Awesome. Ish, how about you?
Mine is don't stop learning. You know, even just after you graduate, continue reading books that interest you, listen to podcasts. All that stuff is going to help you not only in your career, but just like feel like you're growing, even if you're not growing in your job. So keep learning.
Love that. And Janella?
I think just start building your network now. I forgot to mention, try and look up Facebook groups. People have looked up UCSF and have asked questions there and found email addresses to email to, find that mentor that you are looking for or find out what that program can offer for you. And so don't be afraid to try Facebook. It's actually a really good tool for those who are curious.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much. So much. I know everyone that joined us today got so much from learning about your journeys and your advice. So on behalf of the University of California, thank you for joining us today for our UC Alumni Career Network webinar. It's a pleasure to connect virtually with each of you. We appreciate you making time to be part of today's event and hope you've gained valuable advice to help advance your career. Once again, I want to thank all of our panelists for their time, generosity, and commitment to the University of California. The insights and advice you each shared today make me especially proud to be part of the UC community. I hope each of you will take a few minutes to provide feedback on today's events, followed by the survey gizmo link, which will appear on your screen when our webinar ends. Your feedback will be used to help determine topics for future sessions. We hope to see you again in January for our next UC Alumni Career Network webinar. And please visit ucal.us/ACN for further details on upcoming webinars or to watch past episodes. Thank you all for joining us and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.